Clerk, call the roll. Tia, call the roll.
Trustee Zalick.
Here.
Trustee LaRocca. Trustee Gieser.
Here.
Trustee Fruzzolone. Here. Trustee Schwarze.
Here.
Trustee McCarthy. Mayor Savarino.
Here. Please stand and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First thing I'd like to do is thank everybody for coming. We'll have another one of these tonight, and then another one on a Sunday for the people that couldn't make today. And if we need a fourth, we will do that, and we'll figure out a day that maybe people could come. What we don't want to do is we don't want people to have their input. We want their input. That's why we did this in morning, at night, and then on Sunday. So we will go from there. So we're here to talk about property tax. We have a lot of stuff prepared to talk about. This is going to be kind of a different type of meeting than we usually have. We asked if you filled out a form like this, if you want to talk. I don't really care if you did or not, you can still talk. The only thing that I ask is try to keep the meeting orderly, and if it's already said, something is said by the person before you, please don't get up and say the same thing, because it takes time away from everybody else. We don't have a specific time on this meeting, so I really don't care how long it lasts. If it goes till 5 o'clock tonight, would be fine, because the next meeting starts at 6. So I mean, I don't care. I blocked all day out like the other trustees I'm sure have, and staff. So with that, how are we starting this?
We are going to start the meeting with a presentation led by our Finance Director, John Batek, pretty much going over some of the items that people brought up on social media and questions that we've gotten via email and in person. So hopefully we can answer some of the questions that the residents have had from us. If they weren't answered, maybe they'll get answered through this. And then after the presentation, we'll open up to questions, and hopefully we'll have answers for you. So I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Board of Trustees. I will try to keep this brief, although I sometimes am challenged with speaking too much. What we prepared for you is basically a shortened version of some presentations we've already covered in a number of public meetings in August concerning the village's financial position and what we see is the need for a property tax in this coming budget cycle. Just a little background information. Carroll Stream has operated without a property tax for close to 40 years, maybe more. I think it was back in the 70s is the last time that the village imposed a property tax. To the best of our understanding, Carroll Stream, Oak Brook, and Willowbrook are the remaining communities in DuPage County that currently operate without a property tax. At this point in the village's existence, we're past a lot of our rapid growth years that occurred in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and we're pretty much a mature community at 60 years old. I think we just had our 60th birthday this past January. Over the past decade, we've seen increased volatility in a lot of the village's core revenue sources. The sales tax, we've talked at length about that over the year, are by far our largest single revenue source that supports village operations each year. A 1% share or state share that we get from the state of Illinois of sales taxes have been in decline in each of the past 2 of our fiscal years. And in our current fiscal 2020 that ends this next April 30th, we're already in decline again in our current fiscal year. So that's of concern. Many of you know the state of Illinois is not exactly in supreme financial health. That is also another area that's impacted local governments throughout Illinois, and Carroll Stream is no exception. Over the years, the state has increased income taxes. You're well aware of that. We all are. And in doing so, they've basically frozen out local governments who have historically received a share of those revenues. So since 1969, local governments have received 10% of all state income taxes, and it's distributed to all communities on a per capita basis. Carroll Stream and all other local governments are now receiving about 6% of those same revenues. So as the state has increased the rate, they've decreased the allocations that have come to communities. And that opportunity cost to Carroll Stream is in the millions of dollars per year in lost revenues. And the state has also even further cut, as their budget has dictated, revenues from all of the municipalities. So I believe this past year we were cut 5% off the top that goes into the state's budget. So we've lobbied, and municipalities and COGs have councils of government, and the state is just going to do what the state is going to do. So lastly, the discussion of not necessarily a property tax, however, a stable revenue that kind of deals with a lot of this volatility that we've been experiencing, that in and of itself is not a new topic. The village board meets every 2 years in kind of an expanded strategic planning session and goal setting, and that's been a frequent high priority topic of the board, just in terms of how to find more stability in terms of the revenue structure within the village. And a property tax is one solution that would help achieve that goal. I'm going to do a really quick crash course in municipal budgeting for those of you that are kind of new to how the finances in the village operate. The village maintains different pots of money, we'll call them. We refer to them as funds. Each of those has a specific purpose. The village operations circle up on the screen covers most of the day-to-day services provided to the public. And I've listed some of those in the margin on the left. The two largest departments, operating departments in the village, are the police department and public works department. So obviously, and about 75% of our operations are those two departments alone, and those are probably the services that you probably see the most in terms of people out on the street doing their jobs, providing services, plowing snow, keeping the bad people off the streets and getting drugs off the streets and such. We do operate and maintain a water and sanitary sewer utility. That's the kind of the blue circle. So that is supported almost exclusively by your monthly water bill payments, and so that fund does not rely at all on any type of general taxation. So just I shaded it out and separated it because it's really not relevant to the discussion of a property tax. So that's a self-contained public utility that we keep all the funds from water bills and such separate. Lastly, on the bottom of the slide, we have a comprehensive capital improvement plan, which covers items, it's basically the village's roadway program. So when you see construction in town, those projects are paid for out of the capital improvement fund, as well as the stormwater system. Both of those systems are more than 100 miles of storm sewers and roadways that have to be maintained as they age. And so we've been doing a good job, I think, over the years of keeping those in very good condition, and that's an area that's starting to give us some concern with some of this volatility. Just the way we've operated that black arrow, historically, the Capital Improvement Fund has not had any dedicated revenues of its own. It has historically relied on transfers of surplus funds from the General Operations Fund to fund the capital component. Because we've been a little bit more challenged in terms of generating those surpluses, really what we're seeing in our capital planning are deficits and really basically using up reserves in the capital plan over the next several years, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. As an illustration, in each of the last 2 fiscal years, the village has not been able to make any transfers to the capital improvements fund, which normally, in a normal given year, we would be making some form of transfer. So really, the 2 orange circles on the screen are what are germane to our discussion today concerning property tax. And I'll kind of move through this quickly. And at the onset, I kind of remarked in August, we held pretty extensive meetings in this boardroom concerning updates to our financial profiling, peer comparison, as well as setting the stage for our long-range funding of operations and capital. The only takeaway from this is if you weren't able to participate in those meetings, on the bottom of the screen, those are in their entirety on the village's website. Just go to the homepage and click on the news and then budget updates, and those presentations are there in their entirety. This is actually a very condensed version. There's about 2.5 hours worth of presentation materials in those. Don't be worried by those, but there's a lot of charts and graphs that kind of show how we compare to many of our peers. On that subject, we see there's a lot of value in comparing ourselves to similar communities around us. We do a comprehensive peer analysis about every 3 years. It's a pretty exhaustive process, but we like to take a look at financial indicators and see how we're doing on various measures compared to our peers. And I've listed those on the screen, and we've selected those based on some of the factors also on the screen: the population, the footprint, the overall tax value, median home value, median family income. Carroll Stream is all in sync with a lot of these other towns in terms of some of those types of metrics. So that's the group we've selected, and we've been doing this since 2011. So we're on our 4th iteration of that peer comparison. So we'll see a couple of slides from that as we continue on. When we look at total government revenues for Carroll Stream compared to the aggregate of our peer group, so the peer group is the sum total of all 10 of our peers. It's pretty clear that the largest difference lies in the fact that 1 in every $4 in our peer communities, that's the blue cutout on the peer comparison, comes from a property tax. So 25% is a very stable and reliable revenue source. And on Carroll Streams, we rely 44% of all government revenues come from sales taxes. And as you might imagine, with each of the last 2 years in decline, that's provided a lot of stress on our budget. We can't make those surplus transfers to the capital fund because of that. There's increased volatility there too. So if $44 of every 100 in Carroll Stream compared to $30 of every 100 for our peers, just say arguably if there's a 10% reduction, Carroll Stream's losing $4.40 where our peers are losing only $3. So there's a degree of volatility there. For every dollar lost, it arguably hurts Carroll Stream a little bit more because we don't have this piece of the pie, as it were, because property tax, it kind of makes all of the other revenues in Carroll Stream's revenue portfolio, if you want to call it that, more reliant. They're more subject to economic downturn, basically. This graph shows for all of our peers total governmental revenues on a per capita basis for 2018. So that's fiscal year 2018 or calendar 2017, because some of our peers are actually on a calendar year. So we're trying to compare apples to apples as much as we can here. But one thing that's notable, Carroll Stream is the blue bar on this graph. In each of the 4 peer studies we've performed between 2011 and 2019, Carroll Stream has produced the 2nd lowest total revenues per capita among our peer group. So that's a metric that has not changed at all in terms of our position among our peers during roughly the last 8 years or so. The yellow section of each graph represents the portion of revenues that come from property taxes in each of the other communities. Just as a side note, we are aware, obviously, that in Carroll Stream we have a separate fire district. There are 5 of our peers that have municipal fire departments. So I have taken out and removed the fire component of service because it's not a fair comparison. Then we would look lower compared to a city that had a city fire department. So I removed those revenues to try and make it more of an apples-to-apples comparison. Because our revenues per capita are less than most of our comparable communities, we tend to struggle more with meeting basic service demands. This chart covers sales taxes. I apologize, it's probably not terribly easy to read. On the right-hand column is Carroll Stream's performance over each of the last 10 years, basically starting at the Great Recession, the bottom of the Great Recession in 2009. We were down 13.7% in sales tax. Here's the last 2 years, down 6.6 and down 2.4. And again, year-to-date, I'm down 4.1% in our current fiscal year, that is. It's notable that some years we do quite much better than our peer group and DuPage County as a whole. But when we're down, we're usually down markedly over our peer group and the county as a whole. Transitioning kind of to the expenditure side of our budget, this is a very simple chart. It represents the last 5 fiscal years of general fund expenditures, which is, again, the general operating budget. 76% of the total budget is based on people costs, and this is not unusual. The village is a service organization. I mean, we support about 160 full and part-time employees, most of which, again, are in the police department and the public works department. And these are the folks that are out in town fixing the roads, fixing water main breaks, you name it, and the police out on the street. The remainder of the budget, all other expenditures, 24%, can be categorized as contractual services, commodities, and capital equipment. I'd represent these as, these are essentially the tools that help staff deliver services to the community. We'll spend maybe a minute or two on this chart. This is a breakdown of the payroll and benefits component. Again, 76% of all operating expenses over the past 5 years. The salary growth is averaging 4.5% per year. This covers more than standard contractual raises each year. It also includes paid vacation balances at retirement, and as the board can attest, we've had a great number of retirements in the last 2, 3, 4 years. So those are legal obligations we have to pay, accumulated vacation time when a person retires. We've also hired back some of the positions that we lost during the Great Recession during this time period. So this is not just individual staff raises. We've added back a number of positions over this 5-year period as we've recovered from the Great Recession. And just a note on that, our current budget has 164 full-time equivalent employees. That's full and part-time positions. We're still 6 positions below where we were, about 3.5% below where we were at the onset of the Great Recession in 2008. So we're not fully staffed back to that level, and that's not necessarily the goal, but we're just trying to meet the service demands of the community.
Hey, John, just for clarification, so that 4.5, I know this was brought up in the August meeting and so forth, and there's individuals on social media that think that all employees are getting almost a 5% increase of their pay. And so just to make that perfectly clear, that that's not 5% compounded annually, you know what I'm saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. There are a number of, this is all payroll expenses. So again, there are actually some savings. So when a person retires and we hire a replacement, typically that comes at a lower salary, and it's all blended into that number.
Okay. Just one clarification.
Okay. The overtime and FICA costs, Social Security costs are running fairly close to what the salary is, and that should be fairly expected. We've actually made some pretty good progress on the health benefit side, 0.2%, 0.2% increase every year over 5 years. We've made some structural changes to our benefits plan over the years. So that's a cost we're happy to say we've kind of been able to contain, at least for that period. Workers' compensation and unemployment is fairly low in terms of total growth, 0.3%. Then we get to the pensions, and that gives us a little bit more cause for concern in terms of how to control costs. That's obviously something that we're always thinking about when we're looking at the budget. There are basically two pension plans that the village is required to participate in. There are no options. The state of Illinois requires participation in these pension systems. If you're a sworn police officer, you participate in the police pension fund. If you're full-time and meet the qualifications for any non-police position, you're in this plan called the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. IMRF has tracked reasonably well. It's tracked less than the payroll growth at 2.6%. 9.4% on the police pension is a little bit more concerning. That's every year for 5 years. The village is required to contribute an amount an actuary determines each year and to put into funding the police pension plan. And again, the state of Illinois dictates the benefits. They require all municipalities to fund those benefits. And if the village fails to fund those benefits, there are legislative procedures in place where those funds can basically take village revenues to pay themselves. This is a situation that's been in the news quite a bit, and you've probably read or seen news articles on pension funding in the state of Illinois as a whole. Our pension plans are funded at a higher percentage of what many of the state plans are, but again, the village does not skip on those payments because they're required. And again, there may be questions on that as we get Q&As. We're happy to entertain those.
John, just to clarify also, IMRF is not just our non-sworn police officers. That is every one of our staff that works over 1,000 hours a year, and that is a requirement by IMRF. We don't get to pick and choose and say, if you work more than 20 hours a week, we're not going to give you a pension. That is mandated, and you will find that most of the taxing bodies, other taxing bodies, Park District, the Fire Protection District, they also participate in IMRF. The county participates in IMRF. And again, we don't have a choice. If you have an employee that works more than 1,000 hours a year, they have to be put into the pension plan. And we also, just to mention on the pensions, all of our staff has to put in a percentage of their income, their pay, into these pension plans. So our employees do have to pay into the pension plans. Just wanted to mention that also, because that's been a misconception on social media as well.
Great points, Mary. Thank you. Overall, in terms of payroll and benefit costs, the trend each year for 5 years is 4.5%, which coincidentally matches what the salary is, but that's the whole bundle of that 76% of the budget. The remaining 24% of the budget that I mentioned is kind of the tools that we use, contractual services, commodities, and capital equipment, has increased by much more reasonable amount, just 0.6% each year, and it's relatively flat. Some of these bumps in this graph are temporary costs, rental of the temporary facility on North Avenue when we were reconstructing this building for 18 months are included in that, and if you discount some of those expenses, it's basically very flat on that portion of the budget. But again, that's only 24% of the whole. So just to kind of sum it all up, the payroll and benefit costs up 4.5%, the non-payroll costs up 0.6%. The aggregate general fund expenditures growing by 3.6% per year does not match with our general revenue growth of 2.1%. So there's a mismatch there, and I'd say this current budget year, FY fiscal 20, is the first budget in the last 6 years that has not included a surplus in it in terms of budgeting. Because of some of this compression here, we're not bringing as much money in as expenses growing, that surplus has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And so our safety net in terms of that budgeted surplus is pretty much gone. So we've got to find a way to balance the equation. Switching now to the capital improvement plan, and again, the capital improvement plan receives funds from any general fund surpluses to do all of the road projects, all of the storm sewer improvements, and other facility enhancements as well. We have a 5-year detailed plan of projects and whatnot that are scheduled out. In terms of reserve balances, this chart shows that we will not even get through the 3rd year of our 5-year plan without exhausting all reserves. So that's obviously very concerning. We have a number of high-profile projects listed on our agenda in the next several years. So really, kind of what's begging this question about stability of revenues and the need for an additional revenue source. We see where things are trending, so we want to alert the board to this situation before it becomes an all-out crisis. We're not in free fall now, but what we're seeing in our next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have some real challenges in terms of funding our capital. And the cost of deferred maintenance is, our village engineer could probably attest, every year you delay, it typically winds up costing you more money if you let the roads go. And so this plan includes continuing capital at its current pace to be able to fund those improvements throughout the 5-year timeline. The capital plan for the next 5 years, just averaging things out, requires about $5.6 million a year in regular annual funding. And at the onset, I said traditionally the capital fund hasn't had any dedicated revenue sources. That changed a year ago. In July, we instituted a local motor fuel tax. That generates approximately $1 million a year. We also get from the state of Illinois motor fuel tax from IDOT. That's on a per capita basis, about another $1 million a year. So that's $2 million. I'm showing revenues of $2.5 million per year. Very recently, as you know, the state basically doubled the motor fuel tax in Illinois. Municipalities actually were included on a share of that money, so there's an additional $500,000 we think we could expect from the motor fuel tax increase that the state did this past July. We just received actually a first payment in the month of September, so they seem to be making good on that so far. We'll see how that goes. But so in terms of total revenues available to fund capital over the 5 years, I'm showing $2.5 million. Based on the total budgeted expenses that the engineering department puts together for us, we're short about $3.1 million per year. And that will come to roost, as I mentioned, probably in the 3rd year of our 5-year plan. This is somewhat relevant. This chart lists all of the outstanding general obligation debt of all of our peer communities. And if you look at Carroll Stream way on the left here, you'll see that number is 0. I think it's a matter of pride, I think, for this community that we are debt-free, essentially. You look at some of these other towns, $20 million, $40 million, $50 million in debt. The yellow piece of these bar charts shows the interest payments on that debt. So on the high, $10 million of interest payments to bondholders that have to buy the bonds that the town issues. Our philosophy has been pay as you go. So if you don't have the money, you don't spend the money. That would continue, that would be our objective, even with a property tax, that the village continue to pay for its capital improvements as reserves are established, and would you rather have $10 million go to interest payments to bondholders or back into the roads? I think that's the question. And there's no cheaper way, really, of doing capital improvements than paying for it with cash. So it's rare in this day and age to find a municipality that can still do that. So we're very proud of that, and that there's basically no debt for government operations. So we plan to stick to that, even if there were a property tax. Now looking at some of the impacts of what a property tax might look like to the average homeowner. The median home market value in Carroll Stream, based on the Census Bureau, is $231,400. So for all of our peers, and Carroll Stream presently is zero. The average municipal tax bill for these 10 communities is $572 per year. And I've again put the little fire hat icons, and here's a park one. Any tax levy that those communities levy specifically for fire service or parks, I've removed from this analysis, so we're looking at apples to apples again. This slide shows total community tax rate. So this is not just the city or village share. This is school districts, park districts, county government, and as you read your tax bill, there's probably 15 to 18 taxing jurisdictions that's on your detailed tax bill each year. Carroll Stream's rate for its current year, these are for 2018 taxes that are paid in 2019, are just a little bit above the average of 8.95% in terms of total rate. So Carroll Stream's rate's 9.29%. So we already are kind of in the middle to upper, moving toward the upper third of all of our peer communities. That's just a reference point for people to know about in terms of total tax burden in the community compared to some of the surrounding communities. And probably, what's it mean to me? I think that is probably the most common question we're getting. For that median household of $231,000, the tax impact for every $1 million that were levied by the village, it'd be about $61 for every million for that median. And there's there's various other values in terms of property market value of what the tax impact would be. And these are obviously for some of our businesses, in terms of trying to gauge what the financial impact would mean to a property owner at various points. In terms of the timing of actions that would be required each year in terms of for a property tax levy, typically that occurs about this time. It starts up in September. The village board, you may or may not know, is required to adopt the library's tax levy, which they approve a resolution and give it to the village. In October, typically, we would adopt a resolution with an estimate of taxes needed to be raised from a property tax. Typically, in November, we would approve a final levy ordinance, and then the county requires that to be filed with them by the last Tuesday in December each year. And so that would be for the tax bills that would come out May 1, 2020. And with that, I am out of slides, and I apologize if I'm too winded, but I thought I'd at least put some foundational work in there, and I'll give it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and Mr. Baytek, you've done a wonderful job of putting this together. What you've done is recapped all of our meetings into one small abbreviation here, which is good. So with that, we'll start the meeting, and I think the first person was Jack Kranz. Jack?
Good morning. I don't know if everybody knows it, but the IMRF was mentioned. That is the Illinois Municipal Retirement System. It is voluntary. There's no law that says any elected official has to go on it. And yes, you do make pension payments, but relatively small in regards to the amount of money taken out in retirement. Inside the IMRF pension fund, $41.7 billion of taxpayers' money. It's taken off right off the top. By law, isn't this convenient? Everyone knows that the state of Illinois is broke, and the biggest reason it's broke, it owes $165 billion. More money than it can ever pay off. 85% of that debt is to pensions. 85%. The 5 state pensions, active and retired, serve 479,000 people, or 3.8% of the state. Teachers make up 1% of the state, 50% of the state debt, and that's what I'm going to talk about. The state debt for teachers, according to the teacher retirement system, is $73 billion. That's up $7 billion from last year, in spite of the fact that all pension payments were made, plus an additional $2.25 billion. The TRF, Teacher Retirement System Fund, has $52 billion sitting in its pension funds. Add that together, throw in the teachers in Chicago, you have $147 billion looted from the taxpayer. And I say looted because we never gave them our permission to take this money. It always goes up, never goes down. The only solution the powers come up with is to raise taxes. The problem with raising taxes continually is that it drives out people and jobs from the cities and the states. It results in more poverty, more crime, and more violence. In addition, it takes money away from everything else. Big thing in Chicago is crime out of control. No one wants to talk about Quinn, when he was the governor, closed 7 correctional institutions and 2 state mental health hospitals because there was no money. Then he went out and sold $10 billion worth of pension obligation funds, courtesy of the taxpayers. The whole motto in Illinois should be pensions over people. So my whole thing is, let's talk about how we can cut these pensions down. And since teachers are the biggest significant factor of the pension bomb, my suggestion is let's do away with them. When Hurricane Katrina happened, New Orleans scrapped their old pensions, their old education system, and went with 100% charter schools. Everyone should look at the results. The education system is better and it's cheaper. Do we really need teacher unions? I don't think so. Anything you want to learn today, you can look up on the internet. And internet education is the way to go. And if you think it's a silly idea, stop and look at the success Sesame Street has had. The idea, though, is to how do we incentivize students to learn off the internet? Forget the school system. Let's start paying, instead of paying teachers to become multimillionaires in retirement, let's start paying students to learn, and even their parents if necessary. You could pay, let's say, I'm going to throw some numbers up, $3,000 per student that goes for every grade he graduates. Let's throw another $2,000 in for the parents. That $5,000 is 1/3 of what we're spending now per student, $15,000 per year per student. You're going to save $10,000. Not every kid's going to want to do this, but when he graduates, he's going to get a check for almost $40,000. Hey, you did a good job graduating schools. You could use that $40,000, buy a business, buy a car, pay for college, whatever. So that's my idea, and that's what I think we should start looking at, internet education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Anyone want to rebut that? Anybody feel like they want to?
I don't want to rebut, but they were interesting ideas. I'm glad he was able to voice his opinion, but the schools are not something that we deal with.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for. I mean, really, we could talk about it till we're blue in the face. If you watch one of them charts that was on there, we're right in the middle without a property tax of everybody around us. I know what I pay for taxes on my tax bill. It is horrendous. But again, and I've said this before, if it wasn't for the teachers, all my kids graduated from Glenbard North. They all went through the school system here. Rick actually started in kindergarten here probably and went all the way through. Our village manager that was here went through the whole school system, was raised, Joe Brynick. The quality of teachers we have, we're very lucky that we have the quality of I know you're not talking about the quality of the teachers,
I'm talking about the cost.
about the costs. We have no control over that.
Who does?
Well, the
school
people in
district.
Springfield, I would think you need to go down there because
Oh, no, no,
this
no.
came up before, and it came to me, and they wanted us, and I wasn't taken very well by some other mayors that thought we should jump in and stop all the pensions. First of all, we didn't give these pensions out. A lot of these people that are here could be in the private sector, making as much money or more, with the possibility of maybe even owning a company at some time. That's what I'm doing. I could have took a job and I could have been working for Public Works or policemen or whatever. But I took that advantage and continued on to start my own business and to try and make a better living for my family. And I really believe a lot of these people that we're dealing with have master's degrees that we have working here. I mean, they're more than qualified to go any place and work and do anything. We got a community development director that can probably run RE/MAX if he wanted to, with the experience that he has, and a public works director that's got more experience. We have no control over what you're talking about. I appreciate where you're coming from, but I don't know how do we fix that?
Because teachers are the richest, teachers' unions are the richest entity in the state, they're also the largest political contributors. And they spend millions of dollars every year to influence elections all the way from Springfield to school boards. And that's the problem. It's the school boards who continually give them more and more and more. Back in 2017, when they had the pension crisis in Springfield, the rating agencies were talking about making Illinois junk status. Can't deal with that because the politicians in Springfield continually need to borrow more money. One of the ideas that was floated in Springfield at the time was to take this $73 billion pension debt that the state pays and shift it back to the local school boards. You know about this?
Have you gone to the local school districts?
Yeah, pardon me?
Have you gone to the local school district?
I will.
Yeah, that's,
I know that's their
that would be
problem.
the most effective thing
We tell
for you.
people that all the time. If you
Yeah.
got a problem with the schools, attend their meetings.
Yeah.
If you got a problem with the
Oh, I will.
library.
I mean, this
art
is very
district,
interesting, but.
really, that's really where
This
you
has
should
become
be.
my obsession.
Now I have to ask you a question. You sound like you really know what you're talking about, and I'm impressed. We put this together to talk about our property tax. You never said a word about it. How do you feel about what we're looking at doing? After
About
seeing
increasing
the
property
presentation?
taxes?
Increase started.
Well, I'm saying,
this
like,
year.
like I say, everyone wants to increase taxes.
We're not
Nobody wants
increasing
to
them. We
reduce
want to put
pensions.
one on because we don't have one.
Let's talk about reducing pensions. I hate to insult anybody, but are you all on the IMRF?
No, none of them.
Any of you?
None of the
None
elected
of us.
officials are. It's just,
I am part
Appointed.
of IMRF, but I
Don't have
was
to be.
previously, actually, yes, I was. I was required when I worked for 10 years at the Park District. I was required to pay 4.5% of my salary into IMRF because I was over 1,000 hours a year,
but not as an elected.
not as an
I'm
elected
saying
official.
I'm not picking on it, but 4.5% is nothing compared to what the average person and their employer pays 12.4%. Pensions are.
I don't disagree with you.
Well, I'm sorry,
I
Social
don't
Security might
disagree
pay
with you,
22,000, you know.
And the
They're out of whack.
hardship that IMRF creates is their 1,000-hour rule. If you look at, I'm just going to use the Park District as an example, how many employees that they have versus how many employees that if they could increase that hours, so you could have a 25-hour-a-week employee and not have to have them pay into the pension plan, they would have far less employees.
I'm not going to argue with you. There are 656 pensions in Illinois, pension funds, that are funded by taxpayers.
I agree.
There are $271 billion worth of debt. We get rid of these pensions, I'm just talking figuratively, we would become the healthiest and wealthiest state in the union.
Well, you
Just need
still
the
haven't
willpower-
answered my
We
question.
just need the willpower to do it.
Well, wait a
Okay,
second,
thank
you
you.
still haven't answered my question.
Sure.
So what do you feel, you think we should knock the pensions off so we don't have to put a property tax on? For the
Yes.
police and for public?
Yes, I do.
I
And
don't-
since you talked about police, I'm for paying them a lot more money and letting them get
Take
their
it
own
easy,
annuity.
take it easy, I got two deputy chiefs sitting
I'm not, just being honest.
We feel
Everyone
the
in
same
here who's
way.
on a pension,
We feel the same way, but when we're spending money, we don't look at it that way. I mean, I'll be honest with you, there isn't anybody sitting on this side or this side that shouldn't be making more money. And we haven't got, hasn't been a change in what we get paid for what we do and all the things that we get involved in the village. I don't know, I've been up here 19 years, I haven't seen nothing change. I mean, we're not looking for more, we're just trying to do a better job with what we got to work with. And I understand where you're coming from, but you're preaching to the choir. You need to go to the school board, you need to go to Springfield, and you need to get people behind you that believe it.
well, that's why I'm talking to everybody here. Get people behind me.
Well, there you go, they're all behind you, but I see a lot of them shaking their head. They're not sure what you're talking about.
Well, I don't see them because I don't have eyes behind me.
That's a good thing, but I see that's the advantage of being.
But if you don't do something about the pension, Illinois is already in a death spiral. Colleges are in a death spiral.
I
It's just
agree
going down the
100%
tube.
with what you're saying. There is no way out of the debt.
All right,
So
thank you.
Am I right? Crime has gone up?
you're, yeah.
Not in Carroll Stream.
Okay,
Not
thank you
in
very
Carroll
much.
Stream.
John Zimmerman?
Or Jack, as I like to call him.
Oh,
I haven't heard that in a long time. That's great. First of all, I apologize. I think my dog ate my iPhone yesterday. I got a new one. I think I turned off but if it rings, you have permission to throw me out, and I'll take it up with my dog. Good morning. My name is John Zimmerman, and my wife and I have lived in Carroll Stream since 1988. We've raised 2 children here. We've really enjoyed being residents of this town. It has fine services, great schools, friendly people, and safe streets. And I want to thank you for allowing me and other members of the public to give our views on the possible implementation of a property tax. I also want to thank Trustee Schwarzy, McCarthy, Zalek, for responding to my emails on high water bills. I very much appreciate this courtesy to constituents, very important. Enactment of a property tax would represent a radical shift in the way the village is financed and would put yet another strain on the income of already highly taxed property owners in this area. Indeed, Illinois property tax bills have grown 6 times faster than household income. This is according to the Illinois Policy Institute. So new or higher property taxes, no matter how big or small, are going to hurt. But I don't have to tell you that because I'm sure you all feel this pain too. The concern I have is whether this board and mayor have done everything possible to avoid enactment of a property tax. Let's look at the largest expense in the village budget, payroll and benefit costs. The minutes of an August 19th special meeting state that village payroll and benefit costs went up 24.6% between FY 2014 and FY 2019. Salary increases have grown by an average of 4.5% during that same period of time. And I understand what you're saying, but that's 4.5% is all I have to go with. I don't know what the contractual increases were, so I understand that. But that's what I have to go on. But if you look at 4.5%, this is a fairly generous increase when balanced against the CPI for the Chicago Naperville area. For example, the cost of living in this area has increased only 1.6% in the last 12 months. And that's according to the U.S. Department of Labor. Moreover, the median municipal salary in Carroll Stream is higher than 80.91% of Illinois municipal salaries. Moreover, the median municipal salary in Carroll Stream also spent more on payroll in 2017 than 76.35% of other municipal employees in the state. And this is according to the Better Government Association. Now, you can argue that these figures are misleading because the overall cost of living in DuPage County is much higher than much of the rest of the state. And also given the service demands that we have in Carroll Stream. But if you look at the minutes of the August 5th special meeting of the village board, you find these statements. One, I quote, "In terms of the number of village staff per 1,000 residents, Carroll Stream is no longer among the leanest," that's your own words, "in comparison to its peer groups of Downers Grove, Lombard, Bartlett, Woodridge, Edison, Bloomingdale, Wheaton, Hanover Park, Glendale Heights, and Streamwood." Also, quote, "Growth in Carroll Stream staffing over the past 5 years has outpaced all of our peers except for one." Now, what consequence does this have on village finances? Again, I'll just answer that question from the board minutes. Quote, during the last 5 years, village staffing has been increasing at a rate faster than most of our peers. This represents a significant shift from prior peer studies and impacts the village's ability to generate sufficient reserves to fund its capital improvement program, let alone maintaining balance in its operating funds, end quote. And thus the need for a property tax? I just wonder if the village has done all it can to rein in costs in its largest budget item, salaries and personnel. On the other hand, you would think that the rewards for increased staffing would be an even more vibrant village that is good for standing businesses and a magnet for new business. Yet, all villages in the peer group saw sales tax increases over the last 8 years. All that is except for Carroll Stream. In fact, pardon me. In fact, sales taxes in our village fell, as was shown, 6.6% in 2017 and 2.4% in 2018. And in a sense, this is astonishing given the historic burst of economic growth all around us, that sales tax would be falling that much, or at least not keeping pace with the past. Why? Well, one explanation, again, might be found in village board meetings, which state that the Carroll Stream sagging sales tax base is, quote, largely influenced by the loss of large taxpayers in 2017 and 2018, and represents a major shift from our performance in prior peer comparisons. So that question is answered by your own minutes. So again, I have to wonder, is enough being done to reverse this trend of declining sales tax dollars, which have been so strong in the past? Strong enough to fend off a property tax. I forgot how many years it was mentioned we haven't had one for 80 years or 40 years. Are economic development efforts vigorous enough? Well, you have to wonder when the former Piggly Wiggly Butera store stood vacant since 2015. Now, Aldi's is on its way out of town to Bloomingdale. If these two businesses were to be replaced by other large sales tax generating enterprises, would there even be a discussion of a property tax? In fact, if these two sites were indeed to be handed off to enterprises, move-in generating sales taxes, would the village then repeal the property tax? One last area I want to address is the $15 million renovation of the village hall. Now, I'm not one to have a knee-jerk reaction to government needing to renovate or construct new buildings. Government's no different than homeowners. Sometimes you've got to provide the right amount of space. And sometimes that needs to be done in the name of efficiency. I agree. But I wonder if our village hall project has had a debilitating impact on standing reserves on capital improvement program funds, which, according to the village board minutes, are expected to be depleted by 2022. And in October 2018 story in the Daily Herald that reported on the opening of the newly renovated village hall, village manager Bob Miller said, and I quote, fortunately, we've been able to build up reserves for things like this expansion of an old building. And one of the things we looked at was, do we build a new building or do we renovate the existing building? And it was a lot cheaper to do the renovation, so we're kind of proud that we don't have to go into debt. Quote, we don't have to increase taxes. Now, a year later, there is discussion of increasing taxes. Minutes of an August 19th special meeting discussed presenting one possible approach on how to use a property tax. Use it to stabilize a general fund and, I quote, to bolster funding for capital improvements. In other words, a tax increase. Now, was the reconstruction of the village hall thought of well enough in terms of its short and long-term financial impact against sales tax base, or was the thinking that any shortfall in the general fund or reserves attributed to the village hall project could be easily covered by a newly enacted property tax, so no worries? To conclude, I'd urge you to go back in the budget and seek more savings before enacting a property tax. Other peer communities have found ways to spend less. The minutes also note that 6 of 10 peer communities actually cut staffing over the past 5 years. Bartlett cut staffing by 4.3% and still saw 9% increases in sales tax during those same years. Take another look at economic development efforts and see where they can be improved to entice more commerce. Do as you did after the flooding and Form a committee and get residents involved in deciding the need for a property tax increase. Get us involved in that, like you did with the flooding, when that created a lot of controversy and anger. And you created a committee, and it worked pretty well, I think. It really did. In any event, any increase in property taxes is going to hurt in a community like Carroll Stream that already pays 2.7% of the value of their home in taxes, and that is two times the national average. I would like to end this on a positive note. According to Crane Chicago Business, Carroll Stream is one of only 10 of 121 Chicago suburbs whose home sales and median price of a home are both up this year. That's fantastic. I'd have to think that one of the main reasons, well, maybe not me, I'd like to think one of the reasons people choose Carroll Stream is because it is one of the few communities in the state, indeed, I mean, in the county, indeed the entire state, that doesn't assess a property tax. That's a great psychological thing. If I'm a real estate agent, I would say, hey, you know, Carroll Stream does not assess a property tax. And that homeowner, that potential homeowner, I think, find that to be a drawing point, because you say the words property tax and it just generates nothing but negative thoughts, right? You tell a homeowner, not here in Carroll Stream, we don't have a property tax. We've been doing well without a property tax for 40 years. So, don't take that incentive away. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to talk? Yeah. State your name.
I've been a resident
What's your name?
Randall Mueller. I fall under the sliver of U46. I grew up in Carroll Stream, grew up down the street from Greg on Shelburne. Greg and I, we got a petition together to prevent at that point, the skate park from being built almost right behind your house, partly because of a noise and a placement issue we didn't think was great. Where it is now, definitely seems like it's a much better place. When my wife and I were looking for a house, we ruled out Cook County. I work in Chicago full-time. I'm off this week because we just had our third kid. We moved back to Carroll Stream because we know it's a good town. My wife went to Bartlett, I went to Glenbar North. We found something that was affordable, needed to be fixed up a little bit, but we didn't want to be gouged out because of taxes. My folks who bought their home in December of '80 always told me that there would only be two reasons to ever move out of Carroll Stream: crime and taxes. I understand the taxes need to go up. When we moved in, look at my tax bill, all of a sudden U46 had like a 25% increase. I understand schools take up the bulk. Now that I've got at least one of my kids in preschool at U46, I understand the value of that a heck of a lot more. The timing and the optics of the tax increase, as the gentleman before me kind of alluded to, they kind of stink. It seems like this meeting, the one that you're going to have tonight, the one that you're going to have next Sunday, maybe should have happened last year or the year before to at least get the ball rolling. For those of you that don't know, I ran for District 87 School Board 2005. I didn't win, but I was the only one at that time out of 9 people running who opposed the tax increase for District 87 that they were proposing at the time. And it wasn't because I proposed an increase period for it. I disagreed with the amount being requested of homeowners. And at that time, I was single, I was under 30, I wasn't a property owner. My line of thinking was, those people do still deserve to have a voice at the table. Eventually, District 87 did approve an increase, but a smaller increase. And they actually did have a cut in services for, I think, 1 year, where they reduced from 7 periods to 6. And I had people come up to me like, you're gonna hurt my kid getting into school. I'm like, no, maybe your kid doesn't get into the top tier school, but your kid can still go to school. I went to a COD, then I transferred to North Central, got a double major eventually out of it. Everybody has to make sacrifices. I think for a lot of us, our main concern is, where does this stop? Because I think eventually you're gonna get your property tax increase. or property tax, period. Nobody wants it. I understand the necessity for it. But I don't have a strong desire to leave Carroll Stream. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, is that tax going to still be in place? And how much is it? I mean, you put up the graphic there for, I think, Downers Grove. Just for Downers Grove, it looks like they're paying $1,000 separate from the county. Is that kind of accurate? It looked like that. It's like, I don't want Carroll Stream to get to that point. So I think, our elected leaders need to outline a little bit more clearly what's going to happen in the next few years. Mary, I've seen you on the message boards. Looks like a business moved their billing address, and all of a sudden we lost $1 million in revenue. That's a huge hit. I don't know if a lot of people see that. And of course, not everybody should be hopping on social media just to figure that out. But then maybe somebody needs to go around to our other businesses and say, okay, we want you to stay here. Here's some incentives. Here's why you need to stay here. I understand that Aldi didn't just jump ship and because it was unworkable. I understand there's a lot of stuff that was that couldn't be done. But like the McDonald's near me, a lot of people start avoiding that now because their prices have gone up. I understand it's a private business, that, it's like a franchise or something, so they set the rate for that. But when people eventually have an option to go to someplace similar with a lower rate, they're gonna go there. If you got a Costco membership, you're gonna go to Costco. You're not gonna go across the street into our town. It sounds bad, but that's what you're gonna do. Eventually, I don't want people to have to move out and make decisions because years down the line, we still have this tax, this property tax, and there's no reason for it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? State your name and address, please.
Excuse me, I got a little cold. So, my name is Joe Scacia. I live at 258 Bennett Drive in Easton Park. Been on the board there for several years. I just want to make just a couple quick statements. Number one is a little marketing tool just to throw out. In the words of property taxes provides a consistent and reliable budget revenue. Well, I think you've heard everybody now state about the pensions, everything else. I'm retired, so I'm now on a fixed income. My budget doesn't go up. My budget stays the same, no matter what, just on a set income. It doesn't go up for inflation. It goes up based on investments. If the investment community goes down, my income goes down. So those words are, you need to relook at that verbiage as you're trying to sell this. This is more of a heads up than anything. It's not reliable income. You're not going to keep people in Carroll Stream if you keep raising taxes. We're not going to keep people in Illinois if they keep raising property taxes. One other point I'm going to point out. We don't get taxed today on our Social Security, our pension, and our IRA withdrawals in Illinois, correct? Everybody shake their head. What do you think is going to happen down the road? It's going to happen. It's inevitable for this state, as the gentleman before alluded to, both of them. This state is in big trouble. It's probably going to be the first state to file bankruptcy or Chapter 13. It's going to happen. It has to. There's no way they can fix this pension problem. It's a big problem. But if we go down this road, and I realize you're a bit between a rock and a hard place, excuse me.
It's okay. A loaf of bread and a gallon of milk, right?
Should have turned it off. My fault. I apologize.
That's okay.
You got to look at everything. I'm sure you are. It's a tough situation. But one last thing I'll point out. Have you ever heard of zero budgeting? Big companies do it. When I came from the company, we went to zero budgeting, which means you're stuck with your budget for the year. You can't increase it. You can't have 4.5% increases. I got it. Some go up, some go down. Somebody might get 6%, somebody gets 3%, somebody leaves, you hire somebody, I got it. But if inflation's only running at 2%, you got to do something in that area. And that's a big piece of your capital budget. So that's all I wanted to say. You might want to look at the marketing words a little bit more as you're trying to work this through because it's not reliable.
Well, thank you.
So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. And anybody else? Oh. State your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Sharon Leach, 832 Papoose Court. I've lived here since '87. I'm retired now, so I'm just supporting myself in my house, and I want to stay in my house. I like my house, I like my neighborhood, I like my neighbors. But I have questions for you. What are we doing to attract more stores? We need money, so what are you doing? We lost Aldi to Bloomingdale, and I'm not seeing any new businesses moving in.
Really?
Really? I'm not seeing anything major.
What did we lose to Bloomingdale?
Aldi.
Well, if you, I'll go back and we'll do this. Now, being you asked me, I wasn't going to jump in.
I have
Aldi's
questions.
tried to expand, and the restaurant that's in the front, correct me if I'm wrong, I hate numbers, $972,000 they wanted to sell that building to them for, which is probably not worth half of that. But they knew Aldi's couldn't expand without that additional parking lot. They planned on tearing the building down. This is what community development, I could, if I'm wrong, jump in, tear the building down and expand. They held their price. Aldi's went where Staples, I think, was there. It closed, and everybody before them that was there closed. They wanted to be in a big parking lot next to Costco to draw more people in.
Wasn't there any place else in Carroll Stream that we could offer them?
Like what could we offer them?
I don't know.
Tax break? We don't have a property.
No, I'm not talking about tax breaks here. I'm
could we
talking about,
offer 'em?
there wasn't any other place you could say, hey, well, maybe you can't go here, but we know of this place over here?
Yeah, there are.
They made a corporate decision to locate on Army Trail Road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I think was a terrible mistake because somebody mentioned Piggy Wiggly, and if I was them, that's right where I would have went. You got plenty of parking. I mean, it's a perfect location. You are on Army Trail Road, and they could have went in there for a lot less money.
Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
all these are standalone businesses, if I'm not
Well, they want to be standalone. They really want to be, but they want to be where they're drawing other people from Costco to buy a can of goods instead of a case of goods. So-
And our community development, you jump in too. I mean, we talk to the Aldi's people a lot because they also own Trader Joe's. And there's been a great interest in getting Trader Joe's here. And they, again, have made a corporate decision that Carroll Stream doesn't meet their demographic needs. So, so you're in communication with them quite regularly?
Yeah, I mean, we had frequent calls with all these real estate folks. We have tried to direct them to other locations in the village. Unfortunately, one of the things that we deal with in terms of economic development and bringing new businesses to Carroll Stream, a lot of the chain retailers, a lot of the national retailers, they want to be with each other on Army Trail Road. Okay, Stratford Square is just out of Carroll Stream. You know, you could talk about whether is it good or bad that we do or don't have, you know, a regional mall like that. You know, obviously there are times those malls have been great, other times not so great, not doing so well. But we speak frequently with all these real estate people and have worked with them, have directed them to the Piggly Wiggly space, and have tried to encourage them to remain in Carroll Stream.
Well, then, are you actively going out and trying to attract businesses to Carroll Stream?
Yes.
Okay.
And how do we do that? Would you like to tell her?
We have broker contacts for all of the shopping centers that we have in Carroll Stream, so we speak to them frequently. We meet with them and find out who they're trying to bring in. You know, we have great relationships with not only the commercial brokers, but also the industrial brokers. Speak with them, you know, weekly. So we are out there. We've just been in contact within the past week with Old Navy and Bona Beef about trying to get them to come in to Carroll Stream because we've been reading about how those businesses are expanding in the area. So we are working those contacts. We are trying to bring businesses to town.
Okay.
And I know a number of us, the mayor, I think Trustee Frusaloni, you had, what was, last year you had
Roundtable.
the round table with all the major owners of commercial properties come to town and tell us what they're looking for, and we told them what we're looking for. So it was a very good opportunity and a good dialogue.
Okay, so I have another question. If we get a village sales tax, or the village tax, the municipal tax, can we cap the amount?
Cap the amount?
Yes, if we're, and do we have a choice
We
on
haven't
this?
decided what we want to do yet.
Okay, and here's
That's why
the,
we're holding these forums. We have a way of looking at that. And I can tell you that, and I'll share this with you, it was one of the staff's idea, and I thought it was a great idea to bring each one of the trustees in alone, one at a time, so we don't feed off of each other. I don't want anybody to think that if I say something, that the rest of them are gonna fall in line. That don't work that way here. They're all self-thinkers. The two that aren't here, I feel bad, they couldn't get out of work. They'd be here. This board is all self-thinkers. They all have their own approach. We don't always all get along, but we always come to the same conclusion when we talk to each other. So, I mean, we haven't even come to a figure yet of what we want to do or what we want to change when we do that.
Do we have a choice in your decision, or is
We
it,
do have a choice in our
no,
decision.
no, you have a choice, do we have a
Yeah.
choice?
Well, unfortunately, we could have a choice of not to do anything,
Yes.
and in 3 years, you'll have potholes. We won't be able to hire contract plowers because we won't have the money to pay overtime to our staff to do it. And I can continue to go on. We spend millions of dollars keeping our water reclamation center going. I mean, we spend a lot of money to make sure that we have the right equipment to work with and to make the quality of life for people in this town what it is. People want to live here. You know, it can say that they come here because there's no property tax. I believe, in my opinion, from the people that I've met that come here and friends of mine that moved here, come here because they feel safe. We got a great fire department with the best equipment that money could buy by the best trained, not because he sits on there, had nothing to do with it. I started my career there. The school district, you can't, if you don't get educated in this town, it's because you don't want an education. And that goes from kindergarten all the way up. People move here because they feel safe, they feel protected by the police department, they get wrapped a lot for writing tickets, but I can tell you what, that keeps the bad people and the drunks out of our town. They drive all the way around not to come through this town. So they don't kill any of our residents, and I push them to write seatbelt tickets and phone tickets, because that's what causes the accidents, so,
Okay, that's all I had.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Now I'm getting worked up, no. Come on, come up, anybody. Come on, the floodplain. Come on. This is what we're here for. We're here to discuss, but I like it when we can answer back, to try to understand.
John Taracco, 392 Sioux Lane. The property tax is for all property in the village, right? Industrial, commercial, our big apartment complexes, everybody's going to participate in it.
Stop right there, because what I tried to do, and I was told we couldn't do it, is put it on the industrial park. That's where I felt that we needed to do it. Not to put it on the residents, there's no question, we talked about it. The residents don't deserve a property tax, but because of what's happening in the industrial park and what's happening with the internet sales, we have a company that moved out with over $1 million in income that we had, only moved the building department to Itasca. They're here yet. We still got to plow the snow. We still got to, when they need the police department, somebody stealing their stuff in the inside, they got to go there. Why do we lose all these? I explained that already. I mean, we do everything that we can to try and make sure that we spend the money the way we would spend our own money in this town. But that was a thought that I had a long time ago. While I'm on the subject, you're going to get all your time. Somebody said, why didn't we do this 3 or 4 years ago? Go back and look at the records. I've been saying this for 4 years, that we should be putting a property tax on. This ain't new. This is just a matter of when we would die. Would we die in 2021, 2022, and if we didn't build this building, we'd still be in the building that was here with not the facility to handle it. We couldn't take care of the people the way we did, the way we're doing it today. This room is used. How many police officers were here the other day from all over the state? That represent, and why were they here? Because of our DRE, drug recognition experts teaching state police and other people in department. That's what we're about. We're a community of people that take care of people.
Mr. Mayor, can you touch base on Ditch Witch, how they wanted to stay in town, but they can't because they want to expand, and they're in a locked...
My building is right next door to Ditch Witch on Randy Road. And I used to live on Papoose, believe it or not, whoever lived on Papoose. That's, we first moved in. I met with Earl from Ditch Witch. Earl and I have been friends for as long as I've been in that building and maybe before that. Earl sat there at lunch and almost cried because he didn't want to leave. There's no place to expand here for him. I said, I'll sell you my building. Then you can tear the building down next door and tear my building down, and now you'll have a bigger property. It doesn't work that way. West Chicago's got an abundance of property right off of North Avenue on Atlantic Street that he was able to take his equipment and he can go in there and he could show people how to use it. He has a lot of business with big companies, like, I don't know, the phone company, he does stuff with the internet people. It's all trenching stuff and stuff that they do. He did not want to leave here. He didn't want to leave. Was it a big taxpayer? They're all important to us. I don't care how much money that they pay in taxes. But he didn't want to leave. He felt that bad. So, I mean, that's what we live with. I mean, and people think that, you know, a lot of people are getting involved because they hear property tax. They don't get involved when they say, we spent 19 million. We could have spent 50 million and went out and borrowed the money and stuck the residents with that interest payment and everything else. We'd never do that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was, just wanted to clarify that the property tax is for all property in,
Yes.
in the village.
And what is the industrial park makes up 40%?
That's correct.
40% of that will come from the.
And that would include our big apartment complexes too?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and you haven't decided on a rate yet, right?
No, we've got a range that we're looking at, and we weren't even, I'm out of it.
Okay.
They weren't even completely different, which amazes me. But that's good. That's a good thing. Now we'll have to come to that happy medium.
And how would that rate over the years be increased by a vote of the board if an increase was needed?
Well, we would hope that we would put enough in that first of all, when I took over from Ross 13 years ago, my first meeting was, we're going to run this village like a business. And the answer that I got was, that can't happen because it's not a business. Explain to me how a business runs. If you take in 5 million, you spend 4.5 million. That's how business runs. And you rat hole money away from when you need it, because you're always going to need it.
When you're saying about an increase in property tax, Governor Pritzker has a progressive tax, and that could limit property tax levying and increasing. And he's selling it to the residents like a cable bill. You know, right now, it's great, we're gonna cut property tax. Well, in the wording, it could probably go up.
Right.
So much for your little, $90 cable bill, and then when you're a valued customer, you're paying $200. So that's Governor Pritzker.
Yeah, we know about that.
But again, so the progressive tax it's a timely kind of thing with our property tax.
And what scared us is one of the statements the state made after they took a lot of our money away. I'm not very happy about it, and I know that. I'm not welcome in Springfield because I tell them exactly the way we feel as a group and as a village. They were going to freeze the property tax, which means we wouldn't even be able to put one on if we needed it, no matter how bad it got. That means we would have to change our complete direction of the way this village is run. And you think Crane's made a mistake when they said why people want to live here? I can tell you why people want to live here, because we got a great town.
Yep.
I could live any place I want to live, and you know why I live here? Because of the people. I love the people in this town. I mean, we've been here since, I don't know, there was no Stratford Square when I moved here. We 22 years on Papoose Court and 23 or 24 where we are now. The people in this town are different than people in other towns. I go to other towns, I won't mention names. I can't even stand to go there because they're just so self-centered and all about themselves. They're full of ego. It isn't how big your house is or what kind of car you drive. This town is different. There's something about this town that's different than every other town I've been in or where I go. Not because I live here. It's just the people here are different. You walk around and you meet them. I go to church. Somebody said to me one day, you're not very mayoral. You don't wear a suit in a lot of the meetings. This is Carroll Stream. People accept me for what I am. They accept all of us for what we are. I go to church, a pair of jeans and a T-shirt. No one stays away from me. They want to sit by me. I mean, that's the people in this town. They're different, and that's a good thing. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's,
You get me, when I get wound up, it's like,
now, if the property tax goes through, what year are you anticipating the first levy? just hypothetical.
We're stuck right now between a rock and a hard place, because we need to do, Bob, you want to explain that one?
Yes, there was a slide in the presentation. We need to adopt a levy by December of this year for actual go on the tax bill in July of 2020.
May 1st, 2020,
May-
and
May
the
1st.
payments are usually due in 2 installments in June.
Yes.
So your 5-year plan out pretty much includes it coming in soon.
I would think that if we're going to do it, we need to do it, and I've been saying it for over 4 years, that we need to put a property tax. Every budget meeting we've gone into, I've said that we need to put a property tax on. And I'm not ashamed to say that, and if anybody didn't want to vote for me, they didn't have to. But I was overridden, and it was like, well, let's not do it, we'll wait. Well, you can only wait so long, and then what happens is just exactly what was 2 million, 2.5 million. I mean, we keep getting, here, this is another problem we have. If somebody moved in this town and built a building that paid tax, would be wonderful. How many places have we got, and somebody complained about the Park District, I guess, I don't know what it was. Anyway, everybody that moved, how many health clubs have moved in town? We got another one going in on North Avenue. We get absolutely nothing from them. Nothing. And I mean, they'll be the first ones to complain that we're not working with them on permits, we're not working. We get nothing when it's all done. I went to a meeting the other day, we cut a ribbon for a guy, he put solar panels on. This is me. How much you charge for the solar panel? $30,000. Wonderful. How much do we get in taxes? Nothing. Nothing. I get nothing from being in a building. He sells the things, the solar panel, we get nothing. This is what we have to keep fighting, getting nothing. Every time one of you take your phone out of your house and go to your cell phone, we lose money. Every time you buy something out of this town, we lose money. This trustee right here, after every meeting, says at the end when we do our report officer, shop Carol Stream, that's for a reason.
13 years.
I mean, and we all know that. So that's important. Things that happen, we have no control over. They took 10% of our money away and gave us back 5%, like I was supposed to be happy with that. I'm not happy with, and then 2% to tell us what they did, and they gave us back, I guess, 1% or whatever of the 2% that they took away from us. I mean, it's hard to keep track of the state. Do I hate the state of Illinois? I hate the people that run the state of Illinois. I'm very vocal about it. They all know how I feel about them. Most of them should probably be, well, a lot of them are going to jail, it looks like, too. I mean, I won't speak for them. They're already under there's a bunch of them under investigation right now. I mean, you tell me, no, I don't want to get into it. Go ahead. Okay.
That's all I have.
But, and again, I just want to add that most of our property tax options include getting rid of the village stickers. Because some people don't pay village stickers.
Yeah.
And then they complain about wanting a property tax. Well, you know, part of the income from village stickers would help, but people don't unless they get caught, you know, and then they get a ticket, then they come in and buy it. But most of the property tax options include not having the village sticker.
And that's a good point, because that is mostly paid, probably, correct me if I'm wrong, 90%, 95% by the village, the people that live in town, and not the businesses, and some of them buy vehicle stickers. I mean, so there's $700,000 a year that we would be able to eliminate from the people that live here if we so desire to do that. We have to look at what level we're gonna raise the taxes. If we're gonna be down here, I need to leave that vehicle sticker right where it's at. If we're gonna go up a little bit, that's a way to give it back. And those are the things those are the options that some of the options that we're gonna have to sit and really try to hammer this all out in a short period of time. Because we're running out of time. I mean,
And getting back to the village stickers, from what we're hearing, they're down. But as far as I know, the population is pretty much stayed stable, but village stickers are down from last year. So what does that tell you? People aren't buying the village stickers.
Right. I don't find that cost to be that prohibitive anyways.
well, when you look at what they pay in Chicago and the
Well,
problem.
and we didn't raise it for how many years? But
And if I can address something that a couple of people have asked, why haven't we had this conversation before now? We actually have had this conversation, as the mayor said, for at least the last 3 years. And the board's position has been, we want to do everything we can to avoid a property tax. So that's why when we were looking at our budget last year, the very first thing that we do is we go back to our staff and say, you need to cut expenses. When we found out that the state was going to take 5% away from us, that equated to how much, $2 million?
I would argue that when the state raised rates and froze us out from not keeping with their 10% share, that cost Carroll Stream millions of dollars a year, probably $2.5 or plus million dollars.
And when that happened, we were already in the middle of a budget year, so we actually had to go in and rewrite our budget, and we had to not only cut expenses, but we had to defer projects that had been planned, and we keep pushing these projects out. One of the things that we talked about is, do we need a gas tax? Because the gas tax, while I know the owners of the gas stations were not happy, and they came to one of our board meetings to say that they were going to lose money, but the easy thing about the gas tax is, it's not falling on the shoulders 100% of the residents of Carroll Stream. We're a pass-through town, so people from outside of Carroll Stream are helping to pay that gas tax. We've also put on a liquor tax. That was not the most popular thing that we did either, but it was a way to try and buy us more time because we didn't know what else was coming down the road. This is when we found out about that $1 million that all of a sudden John gets our payment from the state, and we're not getting as much. So through investigation through the state, that's how we figured out that a business literally moved their business office to another town. That town didn't even know they were getting that extra $1 million. We lost the $1 million. We had to rewrite our budget again. So we cut, and we trust us. We have cut and we have cut and we have cut. So then we said, let's do an alcohol tax. Again, it's a tax that is also being paid for by people who don't live in Carroll Stream. So we have done a lot to try and hold off on a property tax for as long as we can. And we have said as a board, correct me if I'm wrong, in the last 4 years, a property tax is the very last resort. And I think we are at that point now where it is our very last resort.
And I've been on this board since 2003, and it's been, a property tax has been pretty much part of the discussion every budget cycle. And we've said it has to be the last resort. And another thing we have done is we've done at various times within that period, we've had volunteer buyouts. What other programs have we had?
We had the voluntary separation program back in 2009, after the Great Recession, where we had several long-term employees, including some department heads, leave, and then we were able to hire some of those back and not fill some of those positions, which is why we're trying to staff up again so that we can provide a service level that was pre-recession. But also in the 1990s, the village board considered a property tax, and they didn't want to do it, so that's when we established the real estate transfer tax to avoid implementing a property tax. And I think at this point, as some of the trustees have said, we've taxed about everything else at one degree or another in order to avoid a property tax. So I think there is some consideration about reducing or eliminating some other types of tax or fee in exchange for the property tax.
And Mr. Miller, we've also done that. We also considered we could do certain things. We really did not want to start laying people off.
Correct.
So service levels were what the residents expected.
Correct. And also, this fiscal year included in the budget $600,000 plus of expenditures that were frozen. That includes some police squad cars, a lightning detection system at the town center, some work on the fountain. So the board does look very closely at things in the budget in order to avoid raising additional expenditures so that we don't have to increase taxes. So the year before that, there was also hundreds of thousands of dollars that were frozen. And the year before that, I think it was over $1 million.
0.4 million.
Okay.
So you look at the budget and you look at what we look for, what we're gonna get in gas tax and what we're gonna spend on the roads. And back in my earlier days, I would go down to Bill Cleveland and we would talk about, could we hold off on this road and not spend this 500,000 and do it like next year, the year after? And you want to give them the answer, or you want me to give them the answer? What happens when you wait?
Well, deferred maintenance always is more expensive, just like your homes. If you don't put a roof on it, it's going to start leaking and you might have other damages. And to the credit of this board and previous boards, we actually fund our infrastructure. A lot of politicians give lip service to infrastructure, but we've done a great job keeping our roads in great shapes. We really have, in the Great Recession, tried to cut back on some of our road projects. We're still paying for it today, 10 years later, because, we're doing less. We have more oxidation, trucks are getting heavier. There's just a lot of factors that come into play if you don't take good care of your roads. And I think Carroll Stream has done a fantastic job compared to some of the surrounding communities is taking care of their infrastructure.
Can you also touch base on like grants from the state, how they're drying up and they're not, because explain what the grants and.
Sure, that's a great question. We've been able to secure a lot of grants for some of the more major roadway projects. Lease Road between Gary and Schmale, that was 70% funded by federal grants. They've changed how these grants are obtained and kind of gone to a different system this year. So we'll have to see in these upcoming years if we're able to still qualify for some of these grants. We've applied for grant funding to take care of the creek erosion. That money can't be funded by motor fuel tax because of certain rules that the state has with lockbox funding. If you get it from motor fuel tax, it has to go back into roadways. It remains to be seen, coming up in the springtime if we'll qualify for that grant, but it's about $1 million on a $3 million project to try and stabilize all this erosion from Klein Creek. So we do a lot to try and help, subsidize some of the projects that we have to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Swarzy?
Thanks. Well, I was just going to make some comments. First of all, thank you for everyone that spoke, your thoughtful and educated responses, and just the fact that all of you guys are here shows how much you care about our town, as we all do up here, and including the staff. Nobody wants to do this, and we have a lot of soul searching to do and a lot of more discussion to have, as we've been doing for the last year. I've been on this board for 13 years, and it's been a source of pride to say we don't have a village property tax. I brag about it all the time, and the reality is, and you've heard everything that we've been trying to do, that's just the tip of the iceberg, the things that we've been doing over the last, since I've been on the board for 13 years, the Great Recession. Mr. Zimmerman, I loved your comments. The staffing, as Mr. Meller said, we cut staffing so much, and we had the staff that we did have here, they were doing double time, and they really didn't ask for anything. So we're still below, even though our staff has increased, we're still below the pre-recession levels of 2008, 2009. So those are, again, things we've been doing. But, the truth of the matter is, unless a Carroll Stream resident, aside from cars, the vehicle stickers that we're required to buy if you own a vehicle, residents don't have to contribute anything to helping the revenues of our town if they choose not to shop in Carroll Stream, if they choose not to own a phone. And so that's one of the best things about this town is we provide good roads, we provide good water, we provide, snow plow. And on top of it, we'll throw in some free police protection, and that's what we do for the residents of our town. And so, again, it's a great thing to be able to say, and we don't want to have to do this. We've been squeezing the turnip, and we've gotten pretty much everything we can out of that, so that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to share this with you. I was in a meeting, I meet with the DuPage mayors and managers. I sit on the legislative committee, which we talk to a lot of state reps and senators. And in a meeting about maybe a month ago, somebody come up and said, and I don't remember what the House bill was, and I asked Bob to check to see if it was the truth. There was a change made in Springfield that if we paint a water tower, it has to be done with certain paint, it has to be done with certain union. And I have never been against the unions. I've been on both sides. My father was a union, all my uncles were in a union. I never had a problem with unions. If you can talk to each other, you can solve the problems. But the additional cost, according to one of the other mayors that was in the room, is it's going to cost about $200,000 more to paint the tower. It's like, where do they think we're going to get the money to do this? We have to maintain those towers. We put our name on them. I mean, we're proud to have our name on them. But how often do you think they're going to get painted or cleaned for an extra $224,000? They tried to did they get the fire plugs in there?
I don't believe they did.
They tried to put fire hydrants in there. We have summer help that paints the fire hydrants. And they have to be a special paint painted by a union painter. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is what we have to live with that you don't even see. You don't see those things. Those are the things, and they just keep shoving them to us and saying, you got to do this and you got to do that. And it gets to the point where we live with it and we try to make the best of what we have. I've had more people in this town in all the years that I've been here, over 44 years or whatever it is, ask me what I do since I've been on this board in 19 years. What do you do with our sales tax? What do you do with our property tax? They don't even know that they don't pay a property tax. And that's a fact. And I'll bet you, and I still have people walk around in a jewel or a church or because I try to spend every penny I could in this town. I'll buy even washers and dryers never bought from any place else but Sears or whoever it was. Now we go to Home Depot or Lowe's because it's convenient. And it gives money back to our community. Shop Carroll Stream. Shop Carroll Stream. That's what everybody keeps saying. But I mean, there's things that we have to go through that if you all knew what we know, we'd probably all move to Tennessee or someplace. But I mean, we have to figure out a way to stop it. But we have only control of our borders. We don't have any control outside of our borders. As much as it kills us sometimes where they forced us down, that 10% that they took and gave us back 5%, bothers me so bad. I asked a question to a senator, so I'm going to go to the bank and I'm going to borrow $10,000. I'm going to go back and give them $5,000, and I'm going to tell them I ain't giving them any more money. You can't do that. You'll go to jail. Well, you took my money away, and you're not giving it back to me, but that's okay because they could do it. And that's what we have to live with. That's why, yeah, there needs to be a lot of changes, but they need to be done in Springfield. And and don't forget, believe me when I tell you, you don't have to be afraid of your senators and your reps. You got anything you want to talk about, you should just make an appointment and go in their office. I've been in with residents that wanted to talk about things that they wanted to get done. I really don't like to do it because they don't like me, especially now. I mean, I can't go along with what I don't think is really right, and they have done some really bad things in the state of Illinois, and we're paying the price for them. And it's not going to get any better. That's my opinion. Somebody said it, they should file bankruptcy, because that's the only way out of the mess that they're in. We don't have enough money in this whole state, by every man, woman, and child, I think the number was $62,000 apiece, to bail them out. So if you got a family of 5, your 3 kids are going to have to pay it too, and you and your wife, and that ain't going to happen. So, I mean, that's what we live with every day. That's why we really try to do the best we could. You got to remember, we're not just the board and the mayor. We live here. We're just like the rest of you. We're all going to pay too. I mean, it's going to cost me a lot of money. I got a building in Carroll Stream. I got a house in Carroll Stream. I'm going to pay double. I'm going to pay every time I get my tax bill, I look at my tax bill for my building in the industrial park, and it's like, $28,000 for the schools? And it's like, there's no one in this building ever gonna go to school. I mean, but it is what it is, and I believe that people move here because of all the reasons that we talked about. Education is a big thing. We got District 25 at the far end of town is probably one of the premier, am I right, Rick, when I say that?
I agree.
Premier school districts in the state of Illinois, not just in here, not in DuPage County. I mean, Glenbard North, I mean, we got people that have enormous jobs that went to Glenbard North. U46 is a
We have a
tough.
congressman who went to Glenbard North.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, it's a tough sell sometimes to try and figure out why do people want to live here? Look around, look at our streets. Drive through our industrial park and then drive through Bloom, I don't want to mention times. Drive through some of the other towns around us and look at their streets. Our industrial park is in better shape than their downtown streets are. I drove through West Chicago the other day. That was one of the conversations I had with Earl. He's lucky he's close to North Avenue. They can do that little strip of street because in the middle of their industrial park, it's terrible. Absolutely. They put no money in their infrastructure because they don't have the money to put in. And if you look at where they are in debt, it's a joke. But I mean, and I'm not saying it's a bad town. I'm saying you need to be able to get things done, but you need to be able to put the money back in the right place. And we've been able to do that for a long time. You got to remember, Ross had 20, I got 13. That's 33 years between two people that we've been able to keep this the way it is with a board that he was lucky to have the board that he had, and I'm lucky to have the board that I have. So we'll continue to do everything we could. We haven't come to the number yet, so we still don't really know what we're going to give up and what we're going to do. So, but it's going to be, I'm sure it'll be balanced right. Anyone else have anything they want to say? Come on.
Everybody's talking about eliminating the taxes, keeping the salaries down and so forth.
Mr. Brewer,
I'm James Brewer, call me Jim. I live at 713 Hickory Lane, Carroll Stream, since 1980. And about a year ago, I guess it's about a year ago, there was I think it went to the Supreme Court. It's the Wayfair resolution, and it's internet sales. Are we getting our fair share of internet sales tax to this municipality? It might even take some deep investigation, but people are buying on the internet now. They're not going to the mall. The malls are emptying of stores. And we don't have enough space here to add additional real estate that would generate sales tax. Is that correct? Right?
Yeah.
So my comment, just a comment is, could we investigate getting our fair share of internet sales to our municipality?
That is something we do. We have done.
Yes, I believe that goes into effect next year,
July 1st.
July 1st. So we should be getting a certain share of the marketplace sales that go on the internet. It's a complex calculation of what you get. We will still get sales tax from Carroll Stream businesses that sell on the internet, but we'll also get a certain amount of sales tax on internet sales. So, but that remains to be seen. We can't really put that in the bank because we don't know what effect that's going to have on our sales tax. We're hoping it'll be more, but I guess it's stay tuned. State says we're going to get more, but they don't know how much.
My question was not that we won't get it. Can we be proactive in determining we get what we should get?
We have done that in some examples, haven't we? We looked into a few examples.
We regularly monitor sales taxes coming into Carroll Stream from point of sale within the community. So it's very easy to run down the brick and mortar store that you see a physical presence, and I actually get all of the detail from those types of businesses. So if I have reason to believe there's underreporting or non-reporting where something exists, we absolutely follow up on that. But I really don't get information about what happens on the web in terms of sales. But exactly, but the state did make an effort, and this was through the Illinois Merchants Association proposed legislation that was passed
Correct.
just this past spring, that is supposed to start hopefully closing some of those. They've got some of the big players. The Amazons are all in. They're starting to charge. There's, sales tax is actually a lot more complicated than it would appear on the surface. Presently, out-of-state goods shipped into Carroll Stream would go under a use tax classification, completely separate, a type of sales tax, but that's distributed on a per capita basis. So if we've got a presence that's selling through interstate commerce, it may get back to us through a per capita distribution, which is nothing compared to, we want what's happening in Carroll Stream to stay in Carroll Stream. That's what I think some of the legislation has been hopefully going to be closing up, some of those loopholes. But again, as Mr. Miller had said, we won't know the impacts of that until well beyond a year.
Well, part of the problem is the new tax on internet sales part of it will be destination-based. So if our Carroll Stream residents are purchasing a lot online, those sales taxes will come back to us because they're coming to Carroll Stream.
We fought hard to get that done, believe me when I tell you, because the idea is here, anybody go to Stratford Square lately? Take a look at it, half of it's gone. And what are they gonna build? They're gonna build a Woodman's. What's that? Another big grocery store, right across the street from the big Mariano store, right down the street from the big Myers grocery store, right down the street from Costco, right down the street from the new Aldi store, and I can keep going. How much food do they think people can buy? I mean, really, you could only eat so much. You could keep opening the grocery stores up, but that's not the answer. And everybody's scrambling right now to take in whatever somebody wants to move in, they're taking it in. And because it pays sales tax. I feel bad because if you look at the whole area, we're all in the same boat. We're all suffering together. We figured out a way to jump across. I'll share this with you. It was all in public meetings anyways. We bought a house on Vale, on the corner of Vale and County Farm. And there was some question, do we want to be in the real estate business? No, I don't want to be in the real estate business. But if we get that house, we can go across the street. And there's a shopping center there. And they pay tax. They have liquor license. And they pay sales tax. We already had those people that could come in by our plan that we had. We had already run water and sewer in through there. So the car wash next to them was not a big deal to anybody, but that got us across the street to the two car dealers, the Yamaha dealer, and John and Tony's that we never had any taxes from. So we sit here trying to figure out it's like playing chess, moving the pieces around, and we can't do that because we're not, but we are. We need to get across the street. We get across the street, we buy our way into the IT&T store to get the car dealers, which is the mother lode. Got it? Car dealers pay a lot of taxes, even though they're used cars. Then we get John and Tony's in. And then we don't collect any sales tax from the St. Charles, whatever it's called. It's in the paper. I'm not going to say something that's not.
Pre-owned.
We're not collecting pre-owned St. Charles. Cars every place, for sale signs, Hispaniola, they got everything up there. Anybody can come in. They got mechanics, they got everything in there. We're not getting any sales tax. I said to John, how much we collecting from them? Nothing. How could that be? How could nothing be coming in? So he writes a letter to Springfield, and the answer was, what was the answer? We'll get back to you in 2 or 3 years?
3 years.
That's the answer we got. That's the answer we got. I said, that's not acceptable to me and this board. That is not acceptable. Now write a letter back and threaten them. We wrote the letter back, and who shows up?
The director of the Department of Revenue.
She brings her lawyer with, right? And I love lawyers anyway, so it's like, she says, how do you know they sell cars? I said, are you kidding me? Drive by and look at them. They got a whole lot full of cars. They got salesmen. They got bays they're fixing. What do you mean? How do we know? I said, what do you want me to do? Go buy a car. I'll buy the car and then bring it back and show you that there's no sales tax on it because we're not getting it. Now, then she says, well, we can't really talk about it. Well, then why are you here? She said, because I'm embarrassed that they wrote that letter back and said that we couldn't do nothing for 2 or 3 years. That bothered her. and that's why she came in. She made it from Springfield trip to us because she didn't like what somebody under her actually said. So now where is used cars of St. Charles? I hope all in jail, because they weren't paying tax anyplace. But because we caught them not paying tax, they ain't around anymore. They're gone. And as soon as they stepped in there, them cars all disappeared. The one in St. Charles disappeared. And they're probably really, if they ain't in jail, they're probably in Rockford with another deal like that, because that's the way the state is. They don't follow and watch what they should be doing. And that's how we could have been years if we didn't question it. I mean, where's the money from? I mean, we did get John and Tony's in. The Yamaha dealer didn't come in for whatever reason. I don't understand why, but we've been in there. We all tried to get them. We try everything we could to keep that sales tax coming in. The more sales tax we have coming in, the less pressure we have to ever put a property tax on.
That's really was my point, you know, we have to be proactive in getting our share.
Oh, we're proactive. Believe me, I'm not welcome in Springfield by a lot of people.
But now that that pre-owned St. Charles is out, Chicago motor cars, the expensive vehicles and the trucks are now in that location, so we're getting more tax from that.
Hopefully that'll work in our benefit, because they're on one side of the street, they were on the other side of the street, and now they've expanded to where the used cars of St. Charles are with huge trucks, which is a good thing, because that hopefully will generate some money for us.
And I get your point, Mr. Brewer, in that you're talking about specifically internet sales, making sure we get our fair share, and we are proactive on it. We'll continue to be, based on your suggestion. We'll continue to do it. And my wife works in the retail world, so we're daily wondering where, you know, will she have a job based on how everybody shops online now. And our community development director here and our departments are working really hard to bring in sales tax generators that aren't traditional bricks and mortar. We've got some large vacancy. We have a large vacancy right now on North Avenue, and they're working very hard to bring in a potential sales tax generator.
Do you have a question, sir?
Yes.
State your name and address, please.
My name is Ron Shreve, 400 Tomahawk Court. Moved in here in 1976. Starting in January, we're going to be able to buy the cannabis. And you're going to get some tax money off of that. Supposedly, the governor thinks this is the salvation of everything.
Cannabis?
Marijuana?
Are you asking me a question?
Is the village decided if they're going to open up stores? And are you going to charge, you can make extra money off of that?
Well, this is the way it's going to work. This is what what we know. This is again, and again, you have to understand that I'm different probably than most people. They pass a bill and make medical marijuana available to anybody that the doctor says could have it. Then they say that your doctor gives you the card.
But we got the recreational coming up.
Well, I'm not going to get into that yet. I'm going to work my way there, because there's a path that you have to follow. But then I'm going to tell you, you can have the card, but you can grow 5 plants in your house if you want to. So where do they think that the money's going to come from? Because an idiot would go to a dispensary and buy the marijuana if they can grow it in their own house. It's not that hard. I grow plants for my wife with grow lights. I'm sure I could put 5 marijuana plants in there if I wanted to, and probably grow better than some of the flowers that she has in it. I mean, so anybody will be able to do it. Where's the money going to come from? So this is important to me. And we haven't even really discussed it openly. This census that's coming up, and you heard somebody mention we get paid by how many people we have. It's so important that we count everybody in this town, because the last time we did a census, we built all these places and the number didn't go up. Where did the people go? The houses are still there. They're not empty. We got all these new people in Easton Park on North Avenue. I mean, everything is filled up. But the number didn't go up. There's something wrong. So we got to make sure we count everybody so we get all the money that we got coming in. What was the rest of your question? Where are we?
Yeah.
Right now, we're going to get 8% from the state, whatever that number is, and I don't know how they're going to work that out. They're going to take 8% of the money and then break it up by how many people are in your town. If we decided that we wanted to put a dispensary in, we don't already have some. Now, some of the towns around us already have dispensaries. They have medical marijuana. It's no big secret. Addison's got 2 of them. Naperville has got 1 or 2 that they have, but they voted against it. But I'll tell you why they voted against it later if you really want to know. If we could do it, if we wanted to put it in, we have to find an area. We have to come together as a group and figure out what we want, how many feet from a school, from a church or whatever. We have some spots in the industrial park that would qualify. Is it worth the extra 4%?
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
I don't know. Me, I've sat on the task force against opioids since it started in DuPage County. I've attended meetings with kids and I hear everything. And it scares the heck out of me that we're gonna approve something. I mean, it's done. They have approved it in the state of Illinois, another one of their big ideas. Just put it through. And we're not gonna worry about it. Our police chief fought it. Every police chief in DuPage County was there. The state police, everybody tried to get him to change it. I get all the reports from Colorado. The last 3 years in a row, we have somebody on the county board that said those numbers are all wrong. The state police they don't know what they're doing. The crime's not up, and that's not the truth. Crime is up. It's terrible where they approved it. Where are you going?
Oh, that's okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
it
so
did.
we don't know yet. We really don't know yet what we're gonna do. The state says it's okay. There's some of us, and I won't mention names, I'll just throw that in general, some of us out of 7 that feel if the state says it's okay, maybe we should say it's okay. So we haven't come to that conclusion yet.
Well, I know it's going to put a burden on the police department, too.
On who?
On the police department.
Absolutely.
It's gonna put a burden on everybody that owns in them 20 million square feet of worrying about if they're gonna hit that joint on their way to work and then go to work and run that machine. That's
Correct.
gonna be a problem.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody want to say anything?
I just want to thank everyone for being here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I just want to point out one thing. So we've talked about economic development, and there's been a lot on social media regarding economic development and why don't we go out and get more businesses? And Don alluded to, they work every single day to try and bring new businesses to Carroll Stream. The one thing that I don't think that we really addressed is our industrial park. You know the numbers better than I do, but 8 years ago, the vacancy rate in our industrial park was somewhere about 25%. And in the last 8 years, we have made such great strides to bring in businesses and get existing businesses to expand the size of their buildings, to put multi-million-dollar additions on their properties. And now our vacancy rate is single digits. What, about 4%? So that is that's a big win for Carroll Stream because they're bringing in people to work here. Their people are spending money in Carroll Stream. They may not live in Carroll Stream, but they're spending their money here. That's a really big deal. So we may not be getting as many sales tax generating businesses as we would like. Trust us, if we had our choice, we'd have nothing but stores and restaurants. It's not our choice.
And gas stations.
And gas stations, trust us. We can only try and attract businesses and give them reasons to come to Carroll Stream, and we do. We're part of an organization called Choose DuPage. So we try and get out there to really market Carroll Stream, and I think it speaks volumes. When you can go from a vacancy rate of 25% down to 4%, we are desirable, and we have more economic development projects in the works right now where companies are coming in and tearing down obsolete buildings and putting up multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art buildings. And you're going to see more and more of that over the next couple of years. This is what our economic development department does on a daily basis, and I think they've done a phenomenal job in the last 8 years. So I wanted to point that out because I think some of our industrial park gets kind of lost in the translation because they don't generate sales tax per se, but they do bring in revenue. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I'll just reiterate what Trustee Geiser said. Thank you for coming out. apparently you're the people that really care. We'll see tonight at 6 o'clock, maybe we'll get more people. Hopefully, we'll get a crowd that wants to ask questions. I think that you realize we're prepared to answer anything. We're an open book. You know, I mean, there's a lot of towns that don't, see all these screens? We televise our meetings and we do it. It broke all of our hearts not to be able to do it while we were on North Avenue, because we like to keep everything open to everybody, where you can go on Channel 6 or the other, whatever the other channel is.
And YouTube now.
And YouTube?
Yeah.
And YouTube. If you're YouTube, I hate YouTube, but that's okay. You can go on YouTube if you want it. Somebody said everything should be done on the internet. Did he leave? You ever see some of the stuff on the internet? I don't know if I wanted my kids on the internet. That's all I can tell you. Because stuff pops up on my iPad, I don't even know where it came from. And you don't want that if that's the case.
What are you looking up, Mr. Mayor?
I'm not. That's the, I asked my, here. I give it to my IT guy. I said, it doesn't work. He hits 2 buttons and all these babes start popping up, and it's like, what did you do? He goes, I don't know. And it's like, the stuff that's on the internet sometimes is scary. I mean, are we gonna be able to teach our kids off the internet? I know it's coming. They're gonna have one iPad with them or a tablet instead of a backpack full of books. But I mean, what else is available? I mean, is there better ways of doing things? I don't know. So again, I would just thank everybody for coming. Thank the staff for preparing us and for the questions and answers. Bob, thank you. And for the board that's here today, thank you for your input and for the way you've helped me make this town a better place. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll,
Make the
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Swarzy, seconded by trustee Geezer. Clerk, call a roll. We don't need to call a roll. We'll just adjourn, right?
All in
That's
favor,
fine.
say aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming.